I think we should define ourselves with the kinds of questions we're interested in. So just remember what you don't want to do, and you'll be on the right path. You can ask a question literally on the surface and very quickly find something that just we have absolutely no idea about. And this is what I find fascinating, is our distinctions of mathematics, physics, biology, and chemistry are so false in some sense. You know, a question doesn't care whether you are a subject of physics, if you are interested or a pupil of biology. You know, a question doesn't care.
Yeah.
And this is sort of the one thing that I have to teach myself every time I'm thinking that although you might have an expertise or interest in one field, you will have to jump to think about other fields if you truly care about a question.
I can also imagine a home environment, parents and all that, which is also perhaps playing a big role.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I grew up in a rural setting with very little, sometimes, supervision, and I didn't feel someone was watching me all the time. I had to finish my homework and all that good stuff, and everybody has to just make sure that, you know, you are conforming to the sets of things that are necessary to proceed in a much more traditional academic environment. But beyond that, you know, I would spend 10, 12 hours sometimes outside the house many days. And one of the things that I found often in that home environment was there is a sense of adventure in learning.
Yeah.
And if that sense of adventure is stripped away, you are left with almost something that feels like an unsurmountable mountain. I mean, a mountain is an adventure,
Right.
but if you remove the spirit of adventure in climbing a mountain, what is left in education? You know, then it really is just a mountain.
Yeah.
And it feels daunting. It feels scary.
Yeah.
And I've always felt education should be about an adventure.
Do you remember any particular question that you got obsessed with when you were a student? Any recollection?
I remember one day thinking about this idea of skeletons and realizing that rabbits have as many bones as humans. And I just didn't believe that that could be true. You know, I think I felt, wait a second, you know, rabbits, I've seen rabbits around. How is it possible? I mean, they can't be as complex as us or something. And I was quite obsessed by this idea of comparing. And I actually ended up going to some butcher shops where rabbit meat was sold and pleading to the butcher to give me all the bones. And it was not a very, you can see this is quite a involved experiment. And I actually cleaned all the bones, and it turned out there's roughly around 210 or so bones. So there was no big aha moment it was a very general, very day-to-day process. But in the end, when I did finish that skeleton, I still remember, that moment has stayed with me. Yeah. I convinced myself that yes, you need 200 bones to build a rabbit.
Would you just say you're a scientist, or when somebody asks you, what do you say? Are you a biologist?
I think we should define ourselves with the kinds of questions we're interested in. I define myself most often as, you know, I'm a naturalist. I care deeply about how nature is organized in some sense. But to me, of course, there are a certain class of tools that I'm more comfortable with that I'll think about in that setting. But I'm equally excited about what I don't know or the kinds of skills that I need to acquire to answer those questions.
You studied computer science at IIT, and most of us would know what students who do that do. And you turned to biology, over a period. How did that happen?
Uh, I think, it really is my scientific career and my life in general has been a series of accidents. I wanted to join the Air Force when I grew up as a high school student. Who doesn't want to join the Air Force? You watch these beautiful machines, they can fly. And, it turned out my dad said no. And I was quite sad about it. But then on the other hand, uh, engineering was still my passion. I actually joined mechanical engineering. And early on, of course, and especially in the Indian undergraduate system, you have to declare what you want to be, which makes absolutely no sense to me. How do I know what I want to be? I was thinking about it quite a lot, and it was very clear to me what I did not want to do.
Okay.
It was not clear to me, and it's never clear to me what I want to do, but it's always clear to me what I don't want to do. And I think I found that as a good balancing ground or a compass for myself. But then when I did my PhD, I started thinking about computer science in a much more broader and a much more general sense. And my PhD really was about, could fluids compute? I found fluids fascinating. In your kitchen sink, you can do hundreds of experiments. It was an object that just did almost magic sometimes in front of you. And I spent 6 years thinking about, can fluids compute? And I actually ended up building a computer using water and air bubbles. Uh, and that was a very satisfying experience because for the first time, I was able to take a really conceptual and an abstract idea that I had absolutely no reason to believe early on it would work, and go full circle to conceptually understand the depth of that question and literally build one to demonstrate. And I think once an experience like that happens in a life of a scientist, you realize you have the capacity to take a conceptual idea and go all the way through it and dedicate the time and effort. And it's a very important uh, moment and a feeling in life. And I think from that day onward, I started thinking about much more biological questions.
What kind of questions is Professor Manu Prakash really curious about and interested in?
Often enough, we make observations that we just cannot explain. And you file them in the back of your head, and you keep, after some time, those sets of questions keep coming back at you over and over again. And at some point of time, you really have to give in into that temptation. But you have to listen to your heart. I often think about this, that an intuition plays an incredibly important role. It really is a personal question. And I think for me, it's always been a taste that it changes over time.
Our schooling system, and we have all gone through this, emphasizes a whole lot on the thinking part and much less so on the doing part. Do you have any suggestions for the student listeners or perhaps even teachers?
I mean, I wish we were spending more and more time observing our surroundings as a way to learn. And in the act, I mean, I still bear scars on my hands and my appendages of my observations and my doing as a child. And those sets of moments, although were scary at times, they taught me lessons that I would not learn in a book. But unless you're obsessed with a question, unless you're obsessed with a way of thinking about these sets of ideas, it's very difficult to be able to be passionate about that background.
Do you have any message for our young listeners?
The real message I have for all the young listeners, and especially students, the younger you are, the better. Preserve your sense of curiosity and, the sense of adventure, because that is what's going to help longer term in it's not even about scientific career for that matter. It really is about a life lesson that somehow that joy of learning is really what we are gifted with. And hold on to it, no matter what people say, no matter what your grades are. You would be surprised to know what my grades were in high school and undergrad. They're not that great, but I spent a lot of time exploring, and I think I valued it even if my peers and sometimes my parents and sometimes my teachers didn't value it, uh, because I knew what I didn't want to do. So just remember what you don't want to do, and you'll be on the right path.
Thank you so much, Manuji. Yeah, it was a
No,
pleasure.
it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I wish I could be with some of the students. I think it would have been so much more fun to talk to them. But I'm hoping to chat again and, also learn from some of the students and what they think of what we've been talking about.